Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Village Witch podcast. My name is Avalon, and I will be your hostess for this afternoon. You guys, I cannot describe how excited I am to be back. Life had been crazy. I wasn't expecting to have to take an extended hiatus, and I am so sorry for the lack of update, but things have been insane. But I am back, and we are back on our weekly schedule. On that note, I'd like to just pick up where I left off, and my last episode was on my favorite villainous traits, and I always tend to cover villains first because I love villains, but would this really be a podcast on how do I even describe it? Literary enthusiasm if I didn't also cover the heroes. Yes, our dearly beloved main characters, the heroes of every story. We need to cover that too. I feel like that's important. So grab yourself a cup of coffee, hot tea, whatever beverage calms you down, and just join me on this hero's journey. I want to start by breaking down the different kinds of hero, or at least the three main kinds. There are 1,000 different kinds of hero, and every hero is different. But if you want to categorize it, the best way that I see to do that is by breaking down a hero, a true hero, and an AntiHero, and every tale has one of these. And they're all interpreted differently, and the funny thing is, when you ask somebody, or in my experience, when I've asked people to try and perceive the difference, it was very difficult to do so because it's all based on traits and personal morality. So we're going to go with the dictionary definitions of each one. A hero is a person who is admired or idealized for a courageous achievement or noble qualities. This is a very basic breakdown of a hero, or somebody who does something heroic. And in a lot of cases, this person is... Oh, excuse me. The yawns begin, and I actually just woke up, so I couldn't tell you why the yawning happens. I think I'm just very relaxed, but I have a sip of coffee. In a lot of cases, the hero is someone who is maybe a war hero, or in a lot of cases I see political heroes in stories. These are people who put themselves into an uncomfortable situation to achieve a goal that they believe is worth fighting for. And should they achieve that goal, they are then idealized for that achievement. If we look at Harry Potter, Dumbledore is considered a hero because of his defeat of Grindelwald. If we look at in any story, there's always someone who is idealized for something they did, whether or not that makes them a hero or simply having done something heroic. It is all very, very personal to the author. A true hero is someone who does something heroic for the benefit of others, regardless of their own personal benefit or gain. So a lot of times you can see a hero being the hero and doing this heroic deed, but maybe they still got paid for it, or they did it because it was simply a task that needed done and not necessarily because it bettered their community. A true hero does this heroic deed or task for the purpose of bettering the lives of the people that it will inevitably change. regardless of the outcome it has on himself. And the biggest example I have for this is Hercules. And the great thing is, I know I talk about mythology all the time, but in this case, I can also talk about the Disney Hercules. Now, mythological, historical Hercules, or Heracles as he was originally called, because he was named after the goddess Hera, he was forced to do those tasks. He was told, you need to complete these trials. This is your purpose. So, in essence, that kind of makes him an anti-hero, but we'll get into that in a second. He performs his 12 labors, and at the end of that, he's not even rewarded with the reward he was promised. So, he does these tasks and doesn't enjoy the glory that comes with it, as far as I can tell, in the very original adaptation, not the recent adaptations. The beautiful thing, though, is Disney took this and they really switched it around to define the difference between a hero and a true hero. Is in Disney, we see Hercules wanting to find who he is and be reunited with his parents. And they say, well, to do that, you have to become a true hero. So he starts performing what we know now to be the 12 labors of Hercules, and basking in the adorations of the people of Thebes, and enjoying the fame that comes with that. And he loves that. And he tells Zeus, I can't believe I'm not ready to go home. I'm one of the most amazing people in all of Greece. I've got these action figures, which is a fun little... I love that Disney put that in there, but it just... And then Zeus tells him that doesn't make you a true hero. And at the end of that, we see that becoming a true hero for Hercules wasn't about the fame and the glory that came with saving all of these people. It was about putting yourself into a situation where, yes, you could possibly die, and doing it even though there may not be any personal gain anymore, because by this time he had basically lost all hope of trying to join his parents on Olympus. But he still did the hero thing, because that's what he does. And in the end, personally, I think Meg is the true hero, because she literally died to help Hercules, and he had to go to the underworld and get her, and it was a whole thing. But at the end of that, he becomes a true hero, not for what he did for the people of Thebes, but because he jumped into a pool of death and rescued Meg, regardless of what that meant for his own life. And by this point, Hercules doesn't know that he's got enough God left in him that he's not going to die. And that's what earns him his place on Olympus. And by that point, he loves her so much that he stays on Earth. So that really, I love the Disney version of Hercules for that purpose, is that it really breaks down the difference of a hero versus a true hero. And I feel like that's one of those topics that I feel doesn't really get covered. And in some cases it does, and in some cases it doesn't. But, a person can be writing a hero and or writing a true hero and not realizing it. And I don't know how many people go through that particular definition in school, because I know I didn't. When I was taking my literature classes, I never covered the difference between a hero and a true hero, and as a writer myself now, it was really eye-opening to know the difference. An anti-hero is the third kind of hero that I want to discuss, before we get into the big thing, is defined as a central character in a story who performs a heroic deed but lacks conventional heroic attributes. This person may not know that they have the courage or the strength or the willpower to do this task, but they do it because they've been thrown into that situation and it's survive or die. And ironically, when asked about this particular kind of hero, more people had an actual answer for me, and they say this is the person who, whether they lack this heroic attribute or not, this is the person who sees a problem and doesn't wait for law enforcement to step in and take care of it. This is your dictionary definition vigilante. This is someone who takes the law into their own hands and fixes the problem because they don't trust anybody else to do it. And they just want to protect their community. You see this kind of hero a lot in DC Universe and Marvel. You see it in Watchmen. Rorschach is a huge anti-hero. These are the heroes that go, well, nothing is visibly being done. The problem with this is that a lot of the times it requires a moderate violation of basic human rights on part of the villain involved. Because these are people who start their heroic deeds by, in essence, cleaning up their community. These are people who ambush burglars and they just step into situations and basically take the law into their own hands because they feel like law enforcement isn't doing enough. And the beautiful controversy, I think, that comes with this is that you always get, like, if you're watching a law enforcement television show, there are a lot of anti-heroes involved, especially if there's an episode on vigilantes. And take, I want to say, iZombie. I don't know if you guys have seen it. If you hadn't, spoiler alerts, there is an episode where murders are being performed. No, I'm thinking of a different show. Anyway, in a lot of these situations, there are murders happening, and it's a vigilante behind all of them, but the public doesn't actually want law enforcement to step in because something's finally being done about all of the bad people in their communities. So law enforcement has to do what they have to do because it's the law, but the community doesn't necessarily want them to because no one's been that assertive. And I think that's the beautiful morally ambiguous thing about anti-heroes is they're doing the right thing the wrong way. And society is usually on their side. So there's a lot of fun stuff that goes with anti-heroes, and I think that's the reason why in a lot of situations they are the most popular hero type. Is because there aren't a whole lot of rules that go with that kind of heroism. They just go out and they save people, and that's all there is to it. It's a very simplistic form of heroism, even though it gets them a lot of backlash. This particular kind of hero, if he is a public figure, absolutely has to take every single step possible to make sure he's not found out, because otherwise he's also going to be in trouble. Now, every hero has an arc. Just like a villain will have a villain arc, every hero does too. And this is a phenomenon that has been written and laid out for centuries. And almost every story following the journey of a hero will follow this particular pattern in one way or another. And in a lot of situations, I found out that there is a back and forth, but there is a diagram you can look up. It's called the hero's journey. And I will try to post a copy of this image or a version of this in either the comment section or on my Patreon. Oh, excuse me. But it is a series of 12 stages that every hero, in one way or another, will complete before his journey has ended. That first step essentially being what is called the status quo. This is the hero's normal way of life. This is what life is before they become a hero. And the cool thing about this is I'm going to throw in examples along the way, but a lot of major stories have followed this particular circle. Most notably, a lot of Greek myths, such as the Iliad and the Odyssey, but also modern stories like Star Wars. I know George Lucas actually was very particular about following the hero's journey when he wrote and directed Star Wars. Or helped write. I don't think he was the only writer on Star Wars. I have not looked into that, so if anyone wants to correct me on that, please do so in the comments, and I will look more into it. So the status quo, if we want to follow an example, is if we're looking at specifically the journey of Luke Skywalker. This is him living on Tatooine with his Uncle Owen and just his normal life before the droids arrive on his farm. And then, of course, we see R2 take off, go looking for Ben Kenobi when he has to go get him, and when he comes back, his farm is burned to the ground. And his aunt and uncle are dead. This is then step 2. This is the hero's call to adventure. This is the thing that forces your character or your hero to leave home, leave the comfort of their normal life, and begin their journey. This is usually accompanied by step 2, which is usually like a mentor or a supernatural aid. In the case of Star Wars, that would be Ben Kenobi. At this point, the hero leaves the ordinary world, the world that they know and are familiar with. This is where they leave their comfort zone, and the journey really begins. In the case of, again, Star Wars, this is when he leaves Tatooine and the real journey begins. In the case of the Odyssey, this is after Troy has fallen and the war is won, and Odysseus needs to get back on the sea and find his way home. Don't forget your hot beverage. They are good for the throat. So that step is called crossing the threshold. Step 4 is what's known as the road of trials. This is where your hero has essentially begun their training, and they are testing themselves every single day to see if they can even do this, because your hero still hasn't decided whether or not this is even a good idea. And even I'm not perfect at these breakdowns, so forgive me if I'm vague. I'm going to try to be as non-vague as possible. But the road of trials begins a weird little cycle with this journey where there's a lot of some heroes will skip a step or go back a few steps, or this is the part of the journey, this is like the meat of the journey where a lot of authors deviate, and that's not a bad thing. Every author is different. Every author will write something different. This is just a layout of a basic heroic journey. The Road of Trials is, I think in the case of Star Wars, in my interpretation, it is him aboard the Death Star trying to save Leia. He is then away from his mentor, away from whatever allies he has. Sort of. And doing his best with what little training he has in the real world. And it's scary. We then come to what is known as the approach. This is our hero reaching the point in their journey where they are going through a lot of big moral decisions. Because this is them essentially on the approach to what they think is going to be the final battle. They have no idea that they're not even close. And they're going through a lot of big moral choices, big moral situations where they're thinking, can I do this? Can I not do this? Is this really the right thing? Do I kill them? Do I not kill them? How much mercy do I need to show, and how much is going to be required that I don't show? And am I really brave enough to do this? And they're going to be asking themselves a lot of questions. They're really going to be doubting themselves. And the biggest thing is they're not going to know if they need to have a plan in place or if they can just rush in and trust their instincts. And this big question, I think, is what really personifies our heroes, but it also is what leads to the next step, and that's what's called the ordeal. In this case, your hero is going to lose this fight, and it's going to cause a devastation on them. Either they are going to lose the fight and have a lot of, again, moral issue with this. They're going to be questioning now more than ever if this was even the right decision, if they're even supposed to be there. They're going to be heavily questioning if they're even the hero that was meant to be there. In some situations, a person will die, and it'll be really, really tragic. And in some situations, the hero themselves will die. And in the case of Star Wars, Luke is faced with having to, handle the emotional baggage that this bad guy is his father and then chops his arm off. Like, it's heavy. This is where your hero goes through a serious mental ordeal, but it's also serious physically. And this, in turn, is again going to lead to the next step, which is known as the reward or the transformation. And when your hero recovers from the ordeal, they realize, no, now I have a reason to be here. This is what's happening. Here's the truth of the situation, and this is who I am. And they really start to embrace who they are becoming. The next step is called the magic flight, and in some cases it's called the road back. And this is the situation where they've undergone this big transformation and are now no longer questioning whether or not they are supposed to be there. They are like, this is me, this is what I'm doing, this is what's happening, and I'm going to go do it to the best that I possibly can. Now, at this point, your heroes, some of them have only been at this for a couple of days. Some of them have been at this for a period of years in their lives. Odysseus, it took him 10 years to get home. So, the big vagueness that comes with the hero's circle is that time does not matter. It's just that these are the steps your heroes will eventually go through. However frequent or infrequent they cross a step, be damned. But the return is your hero, they've gone through that transformation. They've taken the steps to go back and correct their wrong. This is them returning to whatever it was they ran away from at the end of step 6. And it's a really big deal for them because they don't know what they're going to be met with. They don't know if they're going to be met with applause for being brave enough to come back. They don't know if they're going to be met with boos because they failed in the first place. This is a huge step for your hero because they're like, okay, well, I don't care how I'm going to be received. I started this. I'm going to finish it. This leads to the step known as the resurrection or rebirth. And in some cases, this is your hero literally coming back to life. Between the step 6, the ordeal, and step 11, the rebirth, it's very possible your hero went through all of the in-between steps in the afterlife. In a lot of situations, your hero is actually dead. There are many situations where there is a figurative death, or the death of their spirit, or them morally handling the death of another person. The rebirth is when your hero bounces back from that death, whether it be figurative or literal, and they are ready for the final battle. And this is the resolution. This is your step 12, essentially your final step, where they fight the bad guy or they achieve whatever goal it is they're trying to achieve and they win. And thus enter the threshold into title of hero. They have performed a heroic deed. They are a hero. Whether or not they are a true hero, that is really dependent on the story. Whether they are an anti-hero, it really depends on how they went about it. But it brings you full circle back to that step 1, which was the status quo. This is their original lifestyle. And it is after step 9, the return, that they leave what is known as the special worlds. So if we remember step 3, called crossing the threshold, this is when your hero leaves the world that they know, that they grew up in, and they enter the world of adventure, the world of heroism, the world of mysticism and mystery. Step 9, the return, is when they leave all the grandeur of adventure behind and they set their eyes on the goal and they return to the normal world afterwards. And I really wanted to cover this because it's amazing how this diagram of the hero's journey, and there are 100 different versions of this diagram, and a lot of them are very different, but a lot of them are fundamentally the same. And it's amazing to me how this basic step-by-step journey will cover everything a hero goes through. And I really wanted to cover this because, one, like I said I left you guys off on an episode of villains, and I probably will try and find a diagram or something to break down for the villain's journey or the villain's arc, if there is such a thing. If there is and you know about it, please leave it in the comments. I'll do an episode on it. But I love breaking down stories, and the best thing about this is that it was diagrammed by an author whose name I cannot remember. I will post it in the comments. But it's an all-around, all-inclusive, step-by-step of a journey for a hero. And there is deviation to it, but it's very minimal in a lot of situations. So comment below on any stories that you like that follow this particular circle And I will see you guys in the next episode. Thank you all so much for being so supportive during my hiatus. My views pretty much never dropped. You guys have been so amazing. Please continue to listen, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.